I spent 22 years believing I was an afterthought, a glitch in my family's perfect software. My name is Kaelie, and while my brother Julian was being groomed to inherit a real estate empire, I was the one scrubbing the grease off the stovetop before the sun even hit the horizon. Hold on. Before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. Seriously, are you folding laundry, driving, or maybe hiding from your own chores? Let me know. For as long as I can remember, my life had a rhythm. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., brew the expensive Kona coffee that I wasn't allowed to taste, iron Julian's silk shirts until there wasn't a single microscopic wrinkle. My parents, Marcus and Eleanor, didn't call me their daughter. They called me the help when guests weren't around, and simply ignored my existence when they were. Some people are born to hold the golden shovel, my mother would say, her eyes cold as she handed me a list of chores that would take 16 hours to complete. And others, Kaelie, are born to dig the dirt. You should be grateful we give you a roof while you dig. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I had no friends, no internet access that wasn't monitored, and a bank account that sat at exactly $0. I was a ghost haunting a mansion. But everything changed during the wedding of the century. Julian was marrying Vanessa, the daughter of a massive tech tycoon. The house was buzzing with elite guests, champagne that cost more than my life, and security guards at every door. My job was simple: stay in the shadows, keep the trays full, and don't make eye contact. I was moving through the garden with a tray of crystal flutes when I saw him. Arthur Vance, the bride's father, a man who controlled half the shipping lanes in the hemisphere. He was laughing with a group of investors until our eyes met. The laughter didn't just stop. It died. Arthur's face went from a healthy tan to a ghostly, sickly white. He dropped his glass. It shattered against the stone, sending shards and expensive bubbles everywhere, but he didn't even blink. He took 3 stumbling steps toward me, his breath coming in ragged gasps. My mother rushed over, frantic, trying to play the perfect hostess. "Oh, Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. Kaelie, you clumsy girl, clean this up immediately. Get out of his sight." She reached out to shove me away, her hand tight on my arm, but Arthur did something nobody expected. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the mess. He grabbed my mother's wrist with a grip of steel and forced her to let go of me. He stared into my eyes, and for the first time in 22 years, someone actually saw me. "Who is this girl?" Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and hope. My father stepped up then, trying to smooth things over. "She's just a distant relative we took in out of charity, Arthur. A tragic case, really. Don't let her ruin the evening." Arthur didn't move. He reached out a shaking hand toward my face, his fingers hovering just inches from my cheek. "Charity?" He spat, the word sounding like poison. "You're lying. I know those eyes. I saw those eyes close 22 years ago in a hospital room where I was told my daughter had died." The entire garden went silent. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My mother's grip on my arm tightened until it bruised, her face a mask of sudden, calculated panic. Arthur looked back at my father, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Marcus? Why does this servant have my late wife's face and my stolen daughter's birthmark?" I looked at the small, crescent-shaped mark on my wrist, the one my parents told me was a stain of a low-born child. Then, Arthur said the words that blew my entire world apart. "I've spent 2 decades grieving a child you told me was buried in the ground. If you don't start talking in the next 10 seconds, I will burn your entire empire to the ash it deserves." My parents exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated terror. They didn't just look guilty. They looked like they were standing on a trapdoor that had just been triggered. And me? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a servant. I felt a cold, sharp spark of something I'd never known before: revenge. The garden, which had been filled with the polite clinking of silverware and the hum of high society gossip, was now so quiet you could hear the wind rustling the rose bushes. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Stolen daughter? The words echoed in my skull, deafening and impossible. Arthur Vance didn't look away from me. His eyes were searching my face, tracing every feature with a hunger that felt like a lifetime of grief finally reaching its breaking point. My mother's hand was still clamped on my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin, but her face had gone from porcelain perfection to a mask of sheer, trembling horror. "Arthur, please," my father, Marcus, stammered, stepping forward with his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of peace. "You're overwrought. The wedding stress, the champagne. You're seeing things that aren't there. Kaelie is mine," Arthur roared, his voice cracking the silence like a gunshot. The guests gasped, some pulling out their phones, the blue glow of screens lighting up the darkening garden. This wasn't just a scene. It was a scandal that could bankrupt our family in a single night. Arthur stepped closer, ignoring the security guards who were hovering uncertainly. He reached out and gently, so gently I almost flinched, brushed a stray hair from my forehead. Her mother had that same fleck of gold in her left eye. And that mark on her wrist? That's not a stain, Marcus. That's the Vance family crest, a birthmark passed down for 4 generations. I saw it the day she was born. The day you told me the nursery fire took her life. I looked at my parents. The people who had watched me scrub their floors for 2 decades. The people who had fed me leftovers and made me sleep in a room smaller than Julian's walk-in closet. My mother's eyes darted toward the mansion, looking for an exit. Any exit. "Is it true?" I whispered. My voice sounded thin, unused to speaking up in a crowd. Am I his?" My mother's grip tightened one last time before she realized the cameras were on her. She let go, her hand falling limp. "Kaelie, don't be ridiculous. This man is confused. Go to the kitchen, now." But I didn't move. For the first time in 22 years, I didn't obey. I looked at Arthur, the billionaire who everyone feared, and saw a man who looked like he'd just found a miracle in a maid's uniform. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice gaining a sharp, cold edge. Arthur turned his gaze back to Marcus, and the warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a predatory stillness. 22 years ago, Marcus, you were my junior partner. You were drowning in debt, and I was at the top of the world. Then the hospital fire happened. You saved me from the flames, but you told me my wife and infant daughter didn't make it. A week later, you suddenly had the capital to start your own firm. You didn't just steal my child, did you? You stole the insurance payout, the trust funds, and my soul. The pieces started falling into place with a sickening thud. I wasn't just a servant. I was a hostage. A living, breathing insurance policy they kept hidden in plain sight. Treated like dirt to ensure I never realized I was actually the one who owned the ground they walked on. Julian, my brother, pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger. "What is this? Dad, kick this old man out. He's ruining my wedding." Arthur didn't even look at Julian. He snapped his fingers, and 2 of his personal security detail, men who looked like they were carved out of granite, stepped forward. "Take the girl to my car," Arthur commanded, "and call my attorneys. Tell them I want every asset associated with the Miller estate frozen by dawn. We're doing a DNA test tonight. If even one hair on her head matches mine, I'm not just suing them, I'm burying them." My father collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. My mother began to wail, a high, thin sound that lacked any real emotion, just the sound of a woman realizing her golden life was over. As the security guards led me toward the gates, I looked back at the mansion. The lights were glittering, the silk ribbons were fluttering, and the wedding of the century was decaying into a crime scene. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. They thought they had raised a servant. They thought they had broken me so completely that I'd never look up from the floor. But as I climbed into the back of Arthur Vance's blacked-out limousine, I realized something. They hadn't raised a servant. They had raised a victim who was about to become their greatest nightmare. Because if Arthur Vance was my father, then everything they owned, the house, the cars, the very clothes on their backs, belonged to me. And I wanted every single cent back with interest. We arrived at a private medical clinic 20 minutes later. The air smelled of antiseptic and power. Arthur sat across from me in the waiting room, his hands shaking as he held a cup of coffee. "Kaelie," he said softly, "I don't expect you to believe me yet, but I promise you if the test is positive, the world is yours. And the Millers? They won't even have a bench to sleep on by the time I'm done." The nurse walked in, holding a tablet. Her face was grave. "The results are in," she said. My breath hitched. My entire identity was about to be rewritten. The nurse looked at Arthur, then at me. "It's a 99.9% match. Kaelie is your daughter, Mr. Vance." Arthur let out a sob that sounded like it had been held back for 2 decades. He reached out for my hand, and this time I let him take it. His skin was warm. "Now," Arthur whispered, his eyes flashing with a terrifying light. "What do you want to do to them first?" I looked at my rough red hands, the hands of a girl who had spent 22 years in the dirt. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "I want to go back to the house," I said. "I want to see the look on their faces when I tell them they have exactly 1 hour to pack their things before I call the police for kidnapping and human trafficking." But as we pulled back up to the Miller estate, the gates were blocked by fire trucks. Smoke was billowing from the 3rd floor, the floor where all the financial records were kept. My parents weren't just going to lose. They were going to burn the evidence first. The orange glow of the fire danced across the manicured lawn, turning the wedding of the century into a literal funeral pyre for my past. As the limousine screeched to a halt, I didn't see my parents mourning their home. I saw them standing by the fountain, barking orders at the household staff to save the jewelry safes, while the wing containing my tiny servants' quarters was swallowed by black smoke. "They're burning the evidence," Arthur growled, his hand tightening on the door handle. "They knew the DNA test would finish them. They're trying to destroy the paper trail before the feds arrive." "A mini hook for you. If you think a fire can stop a billionaire with a vendetta, you don't know the Vances." I stepped out of the car, the silk of my cheap maid's uniform fluttering in the heat. My father, or the man I'd called father for 22 years, saw me. Marcus didn't look remorseful. He looked feral. He ran toward me, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his white shirt stained with soot. "You ungrateful brat!" Marcus screamed, lunging at me. "We gave you a life. We kept you fed. And you bring this monster to our doorstep to strip us of everything." Before he could reach me, Arthur's security team intercepted him, pinning his arms behind his back with a sickening crunch. Arthur stepped forward, standing between me and the man who had stolen my life. "You didn't give her a life, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that carried over the roar of the flames. "You stole her inheritance to fund your failing firm. You used my daughter as free labor while you lived off the interest of her mother's life insurance policy. You're not a father. You're a parasite." My mother, Eleanor, emerged from the smoke, clutching a designer Birkin bag as if it were a child. She looked at me, her eyes darting toward the cameras that were still rolling from the local news crews who had arrived for the wedding. "Kaelie, darling," she pleaded, her voice shifting into a manipulative honey. "Think of the memories. We raised you. We're your family. Tell the police this is all a misunderstanding. We can go back to how things were. We'll even give you a real bedroom." I looked at the 3rd floor window, the one belonging to my room. It was gone, vaporized, along with the one stuffed animal I'd managed to hide under my thin mattress for 15 years. "The memories?" I asked, walking toward her until we were inches apart. Do you mean the memory of you slapping me because Julian's shoes weren't shiny enough? Or the memory of you making me eat in the laundry room while you hosted Christmas dinner? Those memories, Eleanor? I reached out and snatched the Birkin bag from her hand. She gasped, reaching for it, but I held it high. "This bag costs $40,000, I said, my voice projecting so the reporters could hear every syllable. "That's roughly the annual salary of a housekeeper. I've worked for you for 10 years since I was 12. You owe me 10 of these. Consider this a down payment." Arthur smiled, a cold, shark-like grin. "Don't worry about the bag, Kaelie. My auditors have already tracked the wire transfers from 20 years ago. The fire was a nice touch, Marcus, but we live in the age of digital backups. We have everything." Just then, the fire chief ran over, his face covered in ash. "Sir, we found something in the basement. The fire didn't reach the reinforced vault. There are files, and a suitcase with a child's hospital ID bracelet." The blood drained from Marcus's face. He stopped struggling. He knew. But as the police began to move in with handcuffs, Julian, the golden boy, did something nobody expected. He grabbed a heavy ornamental statue from the garden and swung it at the lead investigator, creating a moment of pure chaos. In the confusion, he dived into his sports car, the engine roaring to life. "If I'm going down, I'm taking the money with me," Julian screamed, flooring the accelerator and smashing through the floral arrangements. But he wasn't just fleeing. He was heading straight for the back gate, the one where the cliffside road began. Arthur grabbed his radio. "Stop him, now!" But it was too late. Julian's car fishtailed on the gravel, the headlights cutting through the smoke like twin blades. He didn't realize that the fire trucks had blocked the main exit, and in his panic, he veered toward the narrow service path that hung over the jagged rocks of the coastline. We heard the screech of tires. Then, a silence that felt longer than a lifetime. And finally, the sound of metal twisting against stone. I stood there, watching the smoke rise from my old life, listening for a sound from the cliff. My parents were in handcuffs, their empire was in ashes, and my brother was missing in the dark. "Is it over?" I asked Arthur. He put an arm around my shoulder, but his eyes were fixed on the police radio. "No, Kaelie, this is just the beginning. Because there's someone else involved. Someone who helped them forge those death certificates 22 years ago. And they're sitting in this very garden right now." I looked back at the crowd of wedding guests. My eyes landed on the bride's father. Wait. No. Not Arthur. I looked at the priest who was supposed to perform the ceremony. He was trying to slip away into the trees. The priest, the holy man who was supposed to bless a union built on stolen lives, didn't look so spiritual anymore. He was hiking up his robes and sprinting toward the thicket of oak trees at the edge of the Miller estate. "Father Lawrence!" Arthur bellowed, his voice echoing over the crackle of the dying fire. "Where are you going? The confession booth is right here." My security team didn't even wait for a second order. They tackled him into the damp grass before he reached the tree line. As they dragged him back into the light of the emergency flares, his face was a mask of pure, unholy terror. "I had nothing to do with the fire," Lawrence shrieked, his collar askew. "I only did what Marcus told me. They said the girl was better off with them. They said Arthur was too unstable after his wife died." I walked toward him, the heat from the burning mansion at my back. I looked at this man who had likely sat at my parents' dinner table for 2 decades, eating food I had cooked, while knowing I was a kidnapped heiress. "You watched me bleed from my hands while I scrubbed your church floors for penance, didn't you?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "You told me God loves a humble servant. But it wasn't God you were serving, was it, Lawrence? It was the kickbacks Marcus was sliding into your charity fund." Arthur stepped beside me, handing a thick manila folder to a waiting detective. "It's all here. The offshore accounts, the forged signatures on the death certificates, and the payoff logs. My daughter was a ghost for 22 years because you wanted a faster boat and a bigger parish." The detective didn't hesitate. Click. The handcuffs snapped shut around the priest's wrists. But as the police began to clear the area, a scream erupted from the cliffside. It wasn't Julian. It was Vanessa, the bride-to-be. She was standing at the edge of the jagged drop-off, pointing down at the wreckage of the sports car. "He's alive!" she screamed. "Julian, he's moving!" Against Arthur's protests, I ran toward the ledge. Below, wedged between two massive rocks just above the crashing surf, was the mangled remains of the silver Ferrari. Julian was crawling out of the driver's side window, his face a mess of blood and broken glass. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine through the moonlight. "Kaelie," he choked out, his voice thin against the wind. "Help me, please. You're my sister. You have to help me." I looked down at the boy who had spent his life treating me like a footstool. The boy who had once broken my arm when I was 10 and told our parents I'd tripped so he wouldn't lose his video game privileges. "I'm not your sister, Julian," I shouted down, the wind whipping my hair across my face. "I'm the person who's going to buy this cliff just so I can watch them tow your car to the scrap heap." I didn't call for help. I waited. I waited until the professional rescue climbers arrived with their ropes and stretchers. I wanted him to feel that minute of absolute, soul-crushing isolation. I wanted him to know exactly what it felt like to be invisible when you're screaming for someone to see you. As they hauled a broken, sobbing Julian up the cliffside, he was met not with a hug from his mother, but with his own set of steel bracelets. The golden child was now just inmate number 4052. Marcus and Eleanor were being pushed into the back of separate patrol cars. My mother, the woman who had made me sleep on a floor for 7,000 nights, looked at me one last time. "You'll never be one of them, Kaelie," she spat, her eyes wild. "You're a servant at heart. You'll never fit into Arthur's world." "You're right, Eleanor," I said, leaning into the car window. "I won't fit into his world. I'm going to change it. And I'm starting by using your retirement fund to build a shelter for girls exactly like the one you tried to break." The door slammed. The sirens faded. Arthur turned to me, his eyes wet with tears. "It's over, Kaelie. The lawyers are already drafting the reclamation suits. By tomorrow, everything they thought they owned will be in your name. But there's one more thing you need to see." He led me to the trunk of his car and pulled out a small, weathered wooden box. "I saved this from the hospital fire 22 years ago. I thought it was all I had left of your mother." I opened the box. Inside was a letter, yellowed by time, and a key to a safe deposit box in Zurich. "Your mother knew Marcus was dangerous," Arthur whispered. "She didn't just leave you a name, Kaelie. She left you a map." I looked at the letter. The first line made my heart stop. "To my daughter, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the people you call family are lying to you about the vault." My blood ran cold. The vault wasn't in the house. It wasn't in the basement. It was under the very fountain where Marcus had tried to attack me. The fire was dying down to a smolder, leaving nothing but the skeletal remains of the mansion I once scrubbed until my fingers bled. I looked at the fountain, a massive marble monstrosity of Neptune rising from the waves. It had always been my favorite place to hide when the chores became too much, never realizing I was sitting on top of my own salvation. "Get the sledgehammers," Arthur commanded his team. As the rhythmic thud of metal hitting stone echoed through the night, Marcus screamed from the back of the police cruiser, his face pressed against the glass. He wasn't crying for his son or his wife. He was crying for the secret that was about to be unearthed. The marble cracked. Beneath the basin, hidden by a layer of reinforced steel and decades of grime, sat a waterproof industrial case. Arthur reached in, his hands trembling, and pulled out a digital drive and a stack of ledgers bound in rotting leather. "This isn't just money, Kaelie," Arthur whispered as he flicked through the pages. "These are the original patents for the shipping technology that built my company. Marcus didn't just steal you, he stole the blueprints for my entire life's work. He's been paying royalties to a ghost account for 20 years to keep his own business afloat." I stood in the center of the ruins, the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair. For 22 years, I was told I was nothing. I was told I was lucky to have a floor to sleep on. But standing there, with the dawn finally breaking over the horizon, I realized the truth. I wasn't the servant. I was the owner. "What do we do now?" I asked, looking at the sunrise. Arthur looked at me, a proud, fierce light in his eyes. "Now, we take it all back. Every brick, every cent, every moment of dignity they stripped from you. The Miller name is dead. From this second forward, you are Kaelie Vance." The fallout was swifter than any of us expected. Within 48 hours, the Miller estate was seized by federal agents. Julian was denied bail after his grand escape attempt. Marcus and Eleanor were charged with kidnapping, human trafficking, and 20 years of grand larceny. They went from a king-sized bed to a 6x8 cell with a thin mattress, the kind they used to make me sleep on. I didn't go to their trial. I didn't need to. I had a different mission. 3 months later, I stood in front of the rebuilt gates of the property. The mansion was gone, leveled to the ground. In its place stood the Vance Empowerment Center, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to helping young women escape abusive domestic situations and human trafficking. I looked down at my hands. They were soft now, the scars from the cleaning chemicals fading, but I would never forget the lessons they taught me. I was born to serve, but not the way my parents thought. I was born to serve justice. As I turned to leave, a black car pulled up. Arthur stepped out, holding a small box. "I thought you might want this," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a simple gold necklace with a crescent moon, the same shape as the birthmark on my wrist. "Your mother wore this every day," he said softly. "She'd be so proud of the woman you've become." I clipped the necklace on, feeling the cold weight of the gold against my skin. It felt right. It felt like home. My life as a servant was over, but my life as a Vance? That was just beginning. If you guys enjoyed this journey from the shadows to the light, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear that their past doesn't define their future, and subscribe to Silent Revenge Lab for more incredible stories of justice served cold. Until next time, remember, the people who try to keep you in the dark are usually the ones most afraid of your light.